Minnie Darke is the author of the romantic comedies Star-Crossed, The Lost Love Song, and now her latest novel, With Love from Wish & Co. And Minnie Darke is actually the alter ego of Danielle Wood, who writes literary fiction. But as if leading a double life wasn't enough, Danielle, or Minnie, also co-writes with author Heather Rose as Angelica Banks, and Angelica has written 3 novels for children. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me aboard.
Now, I could refer to you as Danielle Wood. I could refer to you as Angelica Banks, but today I'm going to refer to you as Minnie Darke. But in reality, your actual name is Danielle Wood, correct?
That's right. That's the one I use for dentist appointments and, driver's licenses.
So we're going to delve into your pen name soon. But first of all, congratulations on Minnie Darke's latest book, With Love from Wish & Co. For listeners who haven't got their hands on a copy yet, can you tell us what it's about?
I sure can. So With Love from Wish & Co. is a book that kind of came to me in an idle fantasy. So like most writers, I have a day job, and my day job was causing me a bit of stress a while ago, and I thought, I really need a new day job. And so I clearly set my imagination to working on this challenge, and it came up with the idea that I could be a personal gift buyer. I thought this would be great fun, if people just sort of let me loose with their credit card, and I could stalk their nearest and dearest, their loved ones, and they wouldn't have to do a thing. Just on the birthdays and Christmases for all of the people they loved, a perfect gift would arrive, beautifully wrapped, and everything would be taken care of. Of course, I never did become a professional gift buyer, but one of the perks of being a novelist is that you can make yourself into whatever you want to be, really. So I invented Marnie Fairchild, the professional gift buyer. And the story begins when she makes a most uncharacteristic error, because she's usually very, very good at her job. But one of her very good clients has a 40th wedding anniversary to celebrate on the very same day that his lover turns 65. So 2 parcels, both alike in size and shape. Valerie, what could go wrong?
Yes, well, readers need to read the book to find out. So what gave you this idea? Because it's one thing to fantasize being a personal gift buyer, but the rest of the story, obviously, there's a lot more to it. So what gave you this idea for the novel?
So one of the things that gave me this idea of being a personal gift buyer to start with was observing those kinds of people who feel like money can solve any problem, people who think, if I just throw money at it, that's the solution. And I did actually see a man offer to pay his own wife $1,000 if she would change their toddler's nappy, because he just said, I haven't got another nappy in me today. I will pay you $1,000 if you will change this nappy. And I thought, whoa, it's her $1,000 anyway. But it did open my eyes to the fact that that kind of way of thinking, that I can just outsource anything, including a toddler's nappy, led to a lot of sort of dramatic possibilities. So the main character, Marnie, does this kind of outsourced work for other people. So she really outsources emotional labor, which is, thinking about what people might want as gifts and actually buying those gifts and wrapping them beautifully. So one of the central moral dilemmas in the story is it wrong to get somebody else to buy gifts on your behalf? Because it is actually quite an intimate thing to do, to buy a gift for somebody. It can be quite a big part of the fabric of your relationship. So if you're getting someone else to do it for you, is that okay or not okay? So once I started to think along those lines, I could see how the plot would develop and what some of the principal conflicts would be along the way.
Now, you mentioned that this seed started when you were, a little bit stressed or going through a few things with your day job. What is your day job?
I teach writing at a university. So
I find it confounding that you can have a day job right under Danielle Wood, right under Minnie Darke, and right under Angelica Banks. So just for the benefit of listeners, what does Danielle write? What does Minnie write? And what does Angelica write?
Okay, so Danielle writes more serious literary fiction and essays, and I write a column as myself for the local newspaper on sort of issues that face the place where I live, which is Tasmania. So often the works that I write as Danielle Wood are more likely to be set in this reality. Minnie Darke, on the other hand, writes what we might call commercial fiction, and therein lies a whole other conversation about whether we like that term or whether we don't like that term. But certainly it's meant to be a little bit more escapist. It's meant to be entertaining. It's meant to bring people joy. And I love doing that at least as much as I like writing the more literary fiction that I write as myself. Now, Angelica Banks is a whole other kettle of fish because she's actually two writers. So my dear friend Heather Rose, author of the Museum of Modern Love and Bruni, and she has a new memoir coming out soon. She is the other half of Angelica Banks. So we write children's fiction together under that name. And these days, my day job has shrunk to slightly more manageable proportions. So I only teach 2 days a week now and I write 3 days a week. So that kind of solved that problem a little bit, just got it down into a manageable size. But it is important for people to know that most writers will have a day job of some sort. They will have some other thing that they do, just because it can be very, very difficult to, to buy shoes for your children when you're a writer.
So when you are writing, because you started off writing the literary fiction, at what point did you think, oh, I have this story that's really quite different, that's, contemporary women's, in that kind of genre? When did you start thinking, I think I want to write in a completely different genre?
Well, I think that's probably something that goes way back to school, actually. I did every English subject I could possibly do when I was studying. And a lot of the kinds of assignments that were set for us back in the late 80s were to do with writing in different text types. So when I was studying, we were always encouraged to, write a newspaper article, now write a letter, now write a story from this perspective, now write a story from that perspective. So I think I was really trained in writing in multiple ways. Then I became a journalist, and so I really had to learn to write. And it was while I was a journalist that I had an idea for Star-Crossed, which was Minnie Darke's first novel. And I had the idea that it would be fun to write a novel about a journalist altering the horoscopes in order to pursue her true love. But I sat on that idea for about 20 years before I got serious about doing it. And I wonder, Valerie, if I defaulted to writing literary fiction because I'd studied literature at university and maybe I was even a bit of a literary snob, and maybe it took me a little while to grow out of it and to realize that just in the same way that I like lots of different kinds of movies, I like lots of different kinds of literature. And not only did I want to read lots of different kinds of literature, I also wanted to write lots of different kinds of stories.
So your first novel under Minnie Darke was Star-Crossed, as you mentioned. When you wrote that, did you already know at the outset you would be writing not as Danielle Wood?
Yes, I did. And in fact, when I very first invented Minnie Darke, I actually hoped that I would be able to keep it a secret. I really hoped to have a kind of Elena Ferrante style alias. I thought that maybe I could just create this new character where just the work spoke for itself and the work went out into the world and did its own thing. But a few different things happened. One is I'm just not that good at keeping secrets, whereas I gather that, the person behind Elena Ferrante was excellent at it for a very long time. So there was that. But also in the world of publishing, as you would well know, there's a great expectation now that writers will be the face of their books. And so I've had to learn to do this strange performance of being both Danielle Wood, Minnie Darke, and half of Angelica Banks. And I don't promise not to invent more personalities.
Okay, so when we're often told by publishers, by people in the industry, that it's so important to build your author platform. Now, when you've already built your author platform as Danielle Wood, is it hard? What did you have to do to build an author platform for Minnie Darke? And then do people get confused?
I expect people possibly do get confused, but nothing's a secret. And if you hunt around on the internet, you'll find all the facts. I've written several articles about why you have a pseudonym, why pseudonyms are useful. I'm essentially a very playful writer, and I really enjoy the business of having a few different identities. I feel like it gives me permission to play and to do a few different sorts of things. By having pseudonyms, I'm really clearly delineating for the writer what kind of experience you should expect. So if you pick up a book by Danielle Wood, it's likely to be set in the real world. It's likely to tackle some serious issues. I cannot promise you a happy ending. It might have a bit of a bite to it. If I'm writing as Minnie Darke, you know you're going to get a more escapist story with possibly a more generous heart, and you're going to get a happy ending, and it's going to hopefully give you that lovely catharsis at the end. So if you pick up a Danielle Wood book, you know what you're getting. If you pick up a Minnie Darke book, you know what you're getting. And if I create yet another identity, that'll be clear as well. You are right, though. There's a lot of time involved in managing writer platforms. So I now have a website for Danielle and a website for Minnie. I have a Facebook profile for both, but Instagram only Minnie. Danielle doesn't have one, just Minnie.
All right, so let's talk about this particular book, With Love from Wish and Co. When you started thinking of the idea, can you give us an idea of the gestation period between when you thought of the idea and when you started writing your first draft, and then how long that first draft took?
Sure. So the first book I wrote as Minnie Darke was Starcrust, and that took probably 18 months to write, I think. Then The Lost Love Song was written in about a year. And then I would say With Love from Wish and Co. probably took about a year as well. I have a bit of trouble discerning what is the first draft from subsequent drafts, because I write relatively slowly and I write relatively finished text straight off the bat. Now, Heather and I work together when we're writing as Angelica Banks. We write entirely differently. She writes really fast and does a lot of revision. I write quite slowly, but what you get tends to be fairly finished by the end. So we end up with about the same amount of words, but it's taken us the same amount of time to get there, just by a different path. So what often happens in my writing is that I will know the scenes that need to be written, and I will write those big scenes, and then I will sometimes be left with kind of bridges to fill in my draft. So I will need to glue one scene to another with those kind of little bridging scenes. So a first draft of mine might be when all of the major scenes are written, and then I'm left trying to work out how to join them.
And do you know what's going to happen?
I usually have a rough idea. I don't know exactly. In all of the Minnie Darke books, there are multiple plots. There are fewer multiple plots in With Love from Wish and Co. than there are in the other books. I tend to know how the major plot is going to resolve, but the minor plots, they have a real habit of surprising me. And in With Love from Wish and Co., there are really two love stories operating in parallel. One is a story of two people falling in love for the first time. That's Marnie and Luke. But then there's the story of Suzanne and Brian, who've been married for 40 years. And their love story is a really important part of this book as well. And I really did not know for a long time when I was writing what would constitute a happy ending for them. Would a happy ending be constituted by them reconciling after a big crisis, or would a happy ending for them be that they go their separate ways and start new lives without each other? I wasn't sure which way that one was going to go.
And so with having a job and multiple personalities, when you were writing this, can you tell us about your writing routine? Like, do you have set days that are writing, set days that are day job? Do you aim for a certain word count in a week or a day? How does it work?
I would love to tell you that I had a really tidy writing routine and that I wrote a certain number of words every day. I would love to tell you that. I strive for that. I do tend to make myself nice little Excel spreadsheets in which I plan to do exactly that. But I'm really just an incredibly flawed human being who ends up with way too much to do right before a deadline. So that's the horrible unvarnished truth, is that I strive really hard to have that kind of organized deadline, but organized process, but I don't. Some days are great days. Some days you sit down to write and you write really well. Other days you sit down to write and you don't feel like you have much in the tank, and you may even go backwards. You may even find yourself deleting things. But I have come to believe that the bad days are there for a reason, and that you have to go through the bad days to get back to another good day, and that your brain is actually doing something during that horrible time where you feel like you can't achieve anything or move forward. And then when you have one of those brilliant days where you're just completely in the flow and you write really well, and you maybe write even 4,000, 5,000 words in a day, you think, I'm going to do it again tomorrow and the next day, and look at me go, I can write 5,000 words a day. And then the next day comes and you can't write anything. So it's I do think the discipline is important. So I don't want to give the impression that I think you have to wait for the muse to strike or whatever. I think you have to be in your chair with your fingers on the keyboard for when those days happen, and you have to suffer through some bad days, is what I've learned.
Okay, so let's talk about the discipline then, because do you have a routine or a ritual or anything where you have to be in your chair you are typically in your chair by a certain time, and do you have some kind of routine to get into, or can you also just go right anywhere, right in a cafe, right in a bus, right while waiting for soccer practice?
I have had periods of time where I've got up very, very early before everybody else in my family and started writing really early in the morning. And for a while, that will work really well because that time feels illicit and stolen and great. But then you have to go to bed early at the other end, and sometimes that's not possible. So then you find yourself burning the candle at both ends, and before you know it, you're just exhausted. So my writing has to fit in around all the things happening in my life, which includes the comings and goings of 3 children, 2 dogs, 2 cats, alpacas, chickens, bees. So my life is not simple, and there are times where my disciplines and my routines have to go straight out the window because I have other people who need me or other things going on in my life. But an ideal writing day would involve me waking up probably about 6, dreaming for a little while, drifting through the shower, daydreaming in the shower, and maybe arriving at my writing desk at about 8 o'clock and writing through to about 2 in the afternoon, and then clocking off, feeling satisfied, and going and doing everything else that needs to be done. Occasionally, I get a day like that. Maybe one day in my future there are more days like that, but right now I'm living and working in the midst of a lot of chaos, and I just have to do what I can do.
So it sounds like on a day-to-day level, you are pulled in a million directions. You've also writing under different names. This is your 3rd book under Minnie Darke. You had 3 books as Angelica Banks. So let's zoom out a bit and talk about planning in terms of, do you aim to have a Minnie Darke book out every X months, or Angelica book out every X, what's the planning look like in terms of frequency of what these 3 people put out?
Sure. So really that's driven a great deal by the publishing industry and by the contracts that I have. So work that is contracted tends to nudge in ahead of work that is not contracted. So I have an audiobook coming out in early 2023 as Minnie Darke, that's called Wild Apples. And I have another Audible original contracted to Audible as well, plus another novel contracted. So right now, Minnie's work is rising to the top because it's the one that people are asking for. So other things have had to take a back seat. So Heather and I, as Angelica Banks, at the moment, we're not really working together because her writing career is blossoming and because Minnie Darke is very busy. So Angelica's a little on hold at the moment, but we do hope to get back to her at some point. As Danielle Wood, I'm writing a novel that's about Lake Pedder, which is a beautiful lake that was in the southwest of Tasmania, and it was flooded by a hydroelectric dam 50 years ago. And it was the environmental issue that really created the green movement. So that is a novel that's taken an enormous amount of research, and it's inching along. And I'd love to just have a clone so that I could work on my Lake Pedder novel at the same time as working on the Minnie Darke novels. But I'm just inching forward as best I can. And some days when I wake up, if I feel that today is a day when I really want to work on my Lake Pedder novel, I work on that. And if I wake up and another story is singing to me, then I will pick that one up. Again, it's not as organized as I would like it to be. But I find that working on multiple projects at once is actually quite useful, because sometimes if you hit a wall with one, you can still progress with the other. So it's maybe useful to be able to switch between modes and switch between personalities and switch between subjects. So I do find that helpful.
So based on what you were saying before, it sounds like you've just trained yourself to switch pretty quickly and easily. Some authors need to put on a particular bit of music or something like that to get into the space. Do you pretty much just open your laptop and go?
Pretty much, yes. But I suppose that I should preface that by saying, Valerie, that the last thing I think about when I go to bed at night and the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning is the book I'm writing. So I think that my brain does a lot of work while I'm asleep. I'm a great believer in the importance of dreaming and the importance of getting a good night's sleep and the importance of catching a nap when you can, because I think your brain does an enormous amount of work while it's not actually switched on. So always when I go to bed, I will ask my brain a question about something that I'm writing, and very often by the time I wake up in the morning, an idea has popped up. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's there's some really good research that demonstrates that this works. I read a really interesting book called Why We Sleep, and it really looks into the science of sleeping and napping. And it turns out that this thing I've been doing for years actually has really good basis in science. We actually learn a lot better if we learn something for the first time and then go to sleep. Our brain will file it better or process it better, and when we wake up, we're more able to replicate that task or demonstrate what we've learned. And I think that it works really well for creativity too. So if you ask yourself a question before you go to sleep, what does this character think about this? Or if this happened to this character, what would they do next? Ask your brain that right before you go to sleep and see what your brain tells you in the morning.
Wow. Well, I'm not even joking, but last night I dreamt of Zac Efron. So I'm not sure what that quite means for me. Now, let's talk about characterization, because you've got characters in this, well, in all of your novels, obviously. How do you get to know them? Do you know them quite well before you start writing, or do you discover them as you're writing the story?
I think
your main characters, obviously.
I think they are downloaded to me to a certain degree of finishedness, and then it's my job to color them in a little bit more. So I think I get, I don't know, I'm going to guess 2/3 of them downloaded, and then I need to finish the last third.
What do you mean by
downloaded? They arrive. I guess just like people that you meet. It might be just like people that you meet. When you meet somebody and you spend a bit of time with them, maybe you know them to kind of 2/3 level, and then as you get to know them further, you're filling in that extra third. So I think characters appear and present themselves, and I think they come as a bit of a package deal with batteries included, and then I need to do the finishing. That's how it feels. Maybe that sounds a bit strange, but that's how it feels to me. I love meeting new characters. I love inventing new characters. Someone asked me the other day if my characters talk to me. And I had to really think about that. And what I came up with, the answer that popped out was, I don't think I exist for them. So I think they talk to each other while I'm watching and listening. But I don't think that they care about me at all. I don't think I matter to them one bit. I think I'm the fly on the wall. I think they don't even see me.
Do you ever invent a character that you obviously that you know want to be in your novel and that you like, and it's downloaded at 2/3, and as you uncover the other third, you realize you don't like them?
I think that one of the things I put a lot of effort into, particularly with writing mini Darke books, and this is a bit different with writing more literary fiction as Danielle would, but writing as mini Darke, I try to write every character incredibly generously. So in With Love from Wish and Co, for example, you know, there's a character in that novel that we might see as the other woman, but I didn't want to throw her under the bus. I wanted to really explore her character and her depths and her I wanted her to have dignity and grace in her position in the novel. There's one of the main characters, Brian, who has the wife and the mistress. I also didn't want to throw him under the bus. I wanted to understand him. So I think that particularly in mini Darke books, there isn't anyone I don't like. I think I love them all. And I think that loving them all might actually be one of the secrets to how those books get written, is trying to understand everybody, because nobody sees themselves as the villain, do they? Everybody is just being the hero of their own lives. So I need to understand every character in the way they understand themselves, which is as the hero or heroine of their own life.
Now, you've said before something, so correct me if I'm wrong, something along the lines of having these different names is like having different personalities to be able to write that particular kind of book. So if I was to say, what's your favorite movie, Mini Darke, or what's your favorite, and then what's your favorite movie, Danielle Wood, what would you say?
Oh, I think Minnie Darke could probably quite easily tell you that her favourite movie is Amélie, the French movie.
All those gnomes. Oh, no. Okay.
Quirky, whimsical, and that kind of primary colour palette. Yeah. So I think that as Minnie Darke, I feel like I write using primary colours, you know, red, blue, green, aqua, yellow, orange, you know, bright colors. That's the world and the palette that I'm using when I write in that way. When I write as Danielle Wood, I'm writing in a much more kind of southern Tasmanian palette of, you know, sort of olive green that comes with eucalypts and, you know, that kind of soft slate blue, and it's much, much more muted palette. So there's something a bit of synesthesia in there, which is that I'm relating the colours to sort of the tone or the feel of the book. But again, it's kind of the best way I can describe it. I'm trying to think of a film that does that so that you could see the difference.
Hunter.
Oh, okay.
With Willem Dafoe.
There's actually a movie that other people might not know, but actually probably captures it beautifully. It's called The Tale of Ruby Rose, and it was filmed in the Tasmanian Highlands, and features that incredible Tasmanian landscape. So that's a real favourite of mine as Danielle Wood, and you know, it's got that still got whimsy in it, but a real tickle of darkness too.
What is Minnie Darke's go-to drink, and what is Danielle Wood's?
Okay, I think that Minnie Darke would have a margarita, and Danielle, to be perfectly truthful, would have a cup of tea.
And what is Minnie's idea of a fun night out, and what is Danielle's?
Well, again, Minnie's, you know, a little bit more of a party animal than Danielle. Danielle's, you know, a little bit more sedate. So I think, you know, Minnie would definitely like to go out with friends and, you know, possibly go to a play or go to a movie and then go somewhere nice afterwards for something decadent for dessert. That would be Minnie's style. Danielle might not even go out at all. She might just really, really love staying at home on the couch in her Ugg boots with that cup of tea and her knitting.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now, we know that Danielle lives in Hobart, Tasmania. Where does Minnie live?
Well, Minnie possibly lives in a place called Alexandria Park, which is where two of Minnie Darke's novels are set. So Star-Crossed and then again With Love from Wish and Co are set in this fictional suburb in a fictional Australian city, which I think might be the unholy love child of Perth, Melbourne and Hobart, which are 3 cities I really love. I've lived a little while in Perth and I've lived most of my life in Hobart, and I visit Melbourne quite a lot. So they're 3 cities that I have strong feelings about, and I probably borrowed a little bit from each of them to create Alexandria Park. It's a place that's just a little bit shinier than reality. Things are just a little bit prettier, things are just a little bit smoother, a little bit easier. It's a world that you want to live in. It's a little bit escapist. So I think Minnie Darke probably lives there.
Now, the rom-com, I think, is having quite a moment at the moment. Why do you think that is?
I think we desperately need escapism. And, one of the conversations that I often find myself having is that one about, the relative value of literary fiction and commercial fiction. And people ask me whether I find it more satisfying to write literary fiction or commercial fiction. And the honest answer is that both are satisfying. I just like making things. It just depends what I'm making. But I do find that right now, I get a lot of pleasure from being able to provide people with happiness and joy and escapism and pleasure. And I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of about that. I don't think that we all need to be staring into the abyss every day and taking on serious issues every day. I think it's important that we take on serious issues sometimes, and that we, we consider the bigger questions sometimes, but it's also important that we don't fall into that abyss. And so commercial fiction might be one of the bridges that we use to cross it. And, with Love from Wish & Co., while it is a rom-com, it also does ask some serious questions about some of the things that are most integral to us as human beings, about relationships, about love. I mean, that kind of stuff is incredibly important to everyone, really.
Now, I love a good rom-com, and so do many of our listeners. And I know that a lot of them are interested, love reading them and aspire to write them. So let's end with, what are your top 3 tips for people who want to write a great rom-com?
Okay, I think that one of the things would be something that we've talked about, which is to remember that every character in your story considers themselves to be the hero or the heroine of their own story. And so try to see every character as lovable and having a reason to do the things that they do. Give them the dignity of their own story, even if they are a minor character in your story. Try to really understand them. I think another tip might be to really think about what you really want and value when it comes to love yourself. Like, what actually really turns you on in terms of love and romance. It might not be what you think it is. It might not be the cliched things that are thrown at us. It might not be the flowers and the chocolates and the fancy night out. It might be actually the fact that somebody you really love never, ever, ever lets you run out of milk or the petrol in your car run out, So try to think about what actually really rocks your boat. I don't know what it might be for you, but if you can invest your own desires and your own truth about love in your rom-com, you're probably going to write really authentically and lovingly. And I think probably the third one is just a generic writing hint, which I would say to all of my students, and that is, try to remember that talking about writing isn't writing, and planning to write isn't writing, and complaining about how hard writing isn't writing. And very sadly for me, making beautiful color-coded Excel spreadsheets in which I plan to write 2,000 words a day on this subject or that subject or this project or that project, very, very sadly, that isn't writing either. The only thing that actually is writing is writing. And there are things inside you that will never come out until you've got your fingers on the keyboards or until you've got the pen in your hand. So you can daydream and think, but there's more inside you that won't come out until you're actually in the act of writing. So whatever way you need to trick yourself to get there, just make sure you get there.
That's absolutely brilliant advice. And on that note, congratulations on With Love from Wish & Co. So excited for you, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your lovely questions, Valerie.